Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group, and I'll explain to you guys what that is in a moment. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to guide you in a breathing mindfulness meditation session. This is a type of training that the Buddha used in addition to other things in order to be able to make his way to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. You're going to eliminate all the causes and conditions that produce things like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All those feelings and others are eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. And meditation is one of the things that you do in order to train the mind, but you need other things besides meditation as well. But because meditation is so important, we start each one of our classes with meditation to be able to help you train your mind. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to first be chanting in order to ease into the meditation. And I see many of you guys have the chanting sheets. If you don't have one, they're over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to a chanting sheet. What these chants are is a way to ease your mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. During the lifetime of the Buddha, over 2,500 years ago, he used chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally, and this is how they were able to commit the teachings to their memory. They didn't have YouTube and podcasts and books and things like this to be able to study the teachings, so they used recitation of the teachings, chanting them in order to be able to commit them to their memory. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, a ritual, or ceremony, or worship, or prayer, or anything like that. There's none of those kinds of things in the teachings of the Buddha. If you've been exposed to those kinds of things in Buddhist environments, they're actually misunderstanding what the Buddha taught. He never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. So when you're chanting these, just understand it helps you to ease your mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants. They were probably created by his students either during his life or after his death. Because the Buddha wouldn't have walked around and said, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me. This would be arrogance and ego. And an individual who's gotten to enlightenment wouldn't think of themselves as being above other people. So the Buddha wouldn't have walked around and taught people to chant these things to him out of respect for him. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you might actually have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's why I think that these actually came from the Buddha's students, either during his life or after his death, rather than him himself. As we get into the meditation, you're going to hear me providing you some guidance. So after the chanting, there's going to be some guidance where I'm essentially teaching you and instructing you how to meditate while we're actually meditating. But then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet, where we're all meditating. Everyone here at the temple and anyone joining us online, we're just all going to be meditating at the same time. Now, during this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. If you're in meditation where you have a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you'll cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated. The reason why you can eliminate all these discontent feelings is because it's your own mind that's causing these. Oftentimes, people think it's the outside world that's causing you to be annoyed or frustrated or agitated. But what's happening is if you have a craving for permanence, which the unenlightened mind will, then when you live in an impermanent world, the mind will get frustrated and agitated. So if you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence and you hear a car go by, a bird chirping, a dog barking, maybe someone here coughs or sneezes, you'll cause yourself to be frustrated or agitated or annoyed because you live in an impermanent world, and it's not going to be possible for you to be able to experience permanent silence while you're meditating. It's just not possible because you live in an impermanent world. So if you're understanding that the world is functioning exactly the way it's intended to function, where things will arise, They will change and fade away. When you're in meditation and you hear a sound, you'll understand that, yeah, this is the world functioning exactly the way it's intended to function, and you can reside peaceful and joyful. So during that period of time of quietness, just understand, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds, and you can just understand that this is normal because the world around you is constantly changing. It is impermanent. Then after that period of quietness, we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll help you guys to understand what the Pali Canon and English study group is, because that's what today's all about. And then we'll actually study the words of the Buddha as part of that. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And as part of your journey to enlightenment, you would learn these different positions at different times. It's kind of like assembling a tool belt, because you need these different tools at different times in your journey to enlightenment. And you can learn these in our courses and our retreats and all the various places that we're sharing those teachings. You can learn all 4 positions because you're going to need them at different times in your journey to enlightenment. But oftentimes people are learning in the seated position. So I'm going to give you guys some guidance on that to help you to find something that's maybe even more comfortable than what you have already. And what I'm going to share with you are just suggestions or recommendations. Understand that there's not just one fixed position in order to meditate in, because that would be permanence. And we live in an impermanent world where all of our bodies are different, and we're going to find different things to be comfortable. So these are just recommendations or suggestions that you can consider, and you can implement any of these things that I recommend, but you can also find something for yourself. Because if your body's painful, you're not going to be able to meditate very well that way. But also if the body is luxurious, you're not going to be able to meditate very well there either. But in the middle, if you have comfort in the body, where the body's comfortable, that's what you would actually like to have. So you could sit on the floor, you could sit in a chair. Maybe if someone's at home, you might be on a bench or a sofa in a wheelchair. You can sit however you like. If you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of help soften your seat a bit. And if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross leg position, you like to do that lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, this can impede the circulation in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it, but it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. You might decide to put your palms on your thighs or on your knees. Some people like to put their palms up, and some people just rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you find whatever's comfortable for you. And then anybody who's in a chair and a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair, it's the same thing. Sometimes people like to sit with their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting here in a chair with my legs crossed, so this is an option too. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect with your sternum up and your shoulders back, because it's going to help keep your mind attentive and alert during the meditation. This is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back, and that'll help keep your mind attentive and alert, but it also makes it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting to ease into meditation. You guys are welcome to join in. Then I'm going to come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang namami. Namo สะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตูอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังปุตโตภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivate-ami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakawato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This is breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a meditation that we use in order to train your mind to let go. The thing that's causing your mind to experience things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others is that the mind's holding on. It's craving permanence. It's wanting things to be a certain way. The mind has certain expectations about the world, wanting things to be a certain way. The Buddha taught how to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing the discontent feelings. That's what enlightenment is. That you can get to a point where your mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You'll no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. But the mind doesn't know how to do that. In the unenlightened state, it lacks wisdom of how to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. So what a Buddha does is they figure out on their own, without the help of any teachers or any guides, how to get to that enlightened mental state. And then they dedicate the rest of their life sharing those teachings to help other people be able to understand how to accomplish that goal as well. So this meditation is just one training of many that you need in order to train your mind to let go. Let go, let go. So if 10, 15, 20, 30 times during your meditation you needed to let go, that's normal, particularly for someone who's first getting started. They'll usually have lots and lots and lots and lots of thoughts, or they'll indulge in a thought and follow it for a period of time. The mind is untrained, it's undisciplined. So you're not bad at meditation. Sometimes people are like, oh, I'm bad at meditation, I shouldn't do it. No, that's exactly why you should do it. If your mind's busy, if it's having difficulties focusing, that's exactly why you need it. Meditation is actually kind of like going to the gym and exercising the body. where your body becomes stronger, you can actually get to the point where you exercise your mind and your mind becomes stronger and stronger. Because when you're angry and you're frustrated, you're having stress and guilt and shame and fear, you don't have control over your mind in that situation because it's not disciplined, it's not controlled. But you can get to the point where you can fully control your mind, and you'll get to the point where there's peace and joy in the mind, and you won't experience those discontent feelings any longer. You'll notice that there's focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. This is because what the Buddha discovered is that there are certain pollutions in the mind in the unenlightened state, and as you train your mind to get to enlightenment, you're eliminating those pollutions, and now the mind will perform optimally with focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice that your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming, that you'll be at ease, that you won't have that bitterness and harshness and hostility in your mind any longer. Oftentimes people think that bitterness and hostility is coming from the other person, but you can see for yourself it's coming from your own mind. Nobody's inserting that into your mind. That's actually in your mind. And now if one of your cravings, desires, attachments get triggered, now your anger and your ill will arise. So the mind in the unenlightened state, if it gets what it wants, if it gets what it expects, it gets happy. It gets pleasant feelings like elation, thrill, and euphoria. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants and what it expects, that's where the painful feelings come in the anger, sadness, frustration, and all those other painful feelings. But you can eradicate this and get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful. So we have various programs here to be able to help you learn how to do that. And on Sundays and Wednesdays, it's called our group learning program. This is really helpful for you to be able to really get started. What we do is we take this first book of our book series, and I gradually walk you through this chapter by chapter each Sunday. Tomorrow, we're going to be in chapter 20, which is titled Animal to Human, the Evolution of Our Consciousness. This is where I help students to be able to understand how what you're experiencing in the unenlightened state is very much like animalistic behavior, animalistic instincts. We're not animals, we're actually human beings, and we can actually become better and better human beings. That's what the path to enlightenment is to become a better and better human being. But the unenlightened mind, because of its previous existences in the animal world, oftentimes functions very much like an animal. So you can actually get to the point where you're shedding those animalistic instincts, becoming a better and better human, and it helps to be able to understand this evolution of our consciousness. So I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow, helping students understand that. And then on Wednesdays, what I typically do is I guide students in meditation, and I just open up to whatever questions they have. On Saturdays, we have our Pali Canon and English study group, where this is a bit different than all of our other programs, whether it's a course or a retreat, where I'll be usually teaching in those programs like 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I'll open up to questions. I'll teach another 15 or 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. In this particular program, the Pali Canon and English study group, what we do is we study all the other books, volumes 2 through 13. And we're actually in volume 13 now, because this program is a 1.5-year program where I gradually walk students through these books. And by the way, you can get these for free. You can download all these books for free from our website. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or if you have access to Amazon, you can get them on Amazon as well. We actually started this book last week. It's called Generosity. This book is helping you to understand what generosity is and how to practice it. The Buddha taught giving and sharing, living open-handedly, because as you give and share, it's actually training your mind to let go. Because remember, the unenlightened mind has that holding on, it's craving permanence, while it lives in an impermanent world. So not only is the meditation training your mind to let go, but practicing generosity is doing the same thing. That is training your mind to let go and be joyful in sharing with others. Because when you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you'll have a certain amount of selfishness. You'll find it really hard to share with other people. You'll think that, if I'm going to spend 3 hours doing that, I want this in return. Or if I'm going to spend 3 days doing that, I want this in return. The mind doesn't typically like to share with other people in the unenlightened state. Again, it's like an animal hoarding its food, hoarding its resources. That's what an animal will do. But as human beings, we can share with each other. We can understand that that's important, and it can actually train your mind to help it to let go. So that now what you'll notice is with all the teachings of the Buddha, as you implement them in your day-to-day life, your mind's becoming more and more peaceful, because you're purifying your mind and you're training your mind, uprooting the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings. So in this program, what we do is we study the words of the Buddha using these books as a guide. So what I do is I invite you guys here at the temple or anybody who's online through Zoom to be able to read one of these chapters. These chapters are actually quite short. You can see this one's about a half a page. And after someone reads it, then I'll share some teachings on that. And then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. These are the original words of the Buddha. This is what the Buddha taught during his lifetime. And what we refer to as the Pali Canon is the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha. It's 45 volumes of books that are this thick. Pali is the language that captured the teachings of the Buddha, but now we have them translated into other languages like English, so we can study them in other languages. But we still refer to it as the Pali Canon because that's the original source. So the Pali Canon is the largest, most complete collection we have of the teachings of the Buddha, and this book series extracts that out of those 45 volumes of books and helps you to be able to really focus in on the discourses that you need in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. So this is more like a study group where all the other programs I teach in a more traditional way. So I'll show you guys how this goes. If you guys would like to read or if you have a question here at the temple, we have microphones in the white bowl there. You can get a microphone. You can press the gray button. You'll see the lights come on and you can just hold it up to your chin and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple and they'll be able to hear you online. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And if you would like to keep these microphones with you, you can, because you might have more than one question or someone around you might have a question and you can just share the microphone. And if you're not using it, if you could just turn it off, that would be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then for anybody who's in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, if you guys would like to ask questions, you can put that in the comments section and I'll be able to see that and answer your question. And then for anyone who's in Zoom, if you would like to read or ask questions, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Chapter 11. 4 Means of Sustaining Favorable Relationships. Monks, there are these 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship. What 4? Giving, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality. These are the 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship. Giving, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality under diverse worldly conditions, as is suitable to fit each case. These means of sustaining a favorable relationship are like the linchpin of a rolling chariot. If there were no such means of sustaining a favorable relationship, neither mother nor father would be able to obtain admiration and respect from their children. But since there exist these means of sustaining a favorable relationship, wise people respect them. Thus they attain to greatness and are highly praised.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So what the Buddha is doing throughout his teachings is he's sharing what's called the natural laws of existence. He's helping you to be able to see these natural laws in the world around you. And one of the main natural laws that he's helping you to be able to understand is called the natural law of Gama. You might have heard this referred to as karma. This is the Sanskrit version of the word, where the word Gama comes from the Pali language. And since the original teachings of the Buddha are in Pali, people who usually study his original teachings will use that word. If this translates to just one English word, I would use it because it's easier for everyone, but it doesn't translate to one English word. What it means is cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. Whenever you make decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome Gama, or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, you will experience unwholesome results, or unwholesome Gama. And because the unenlightened mind lacks wisdom of this natural law, it goes around the world tending to make unwise decisions, and you will experience unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. And typically when you're experiencing unwholesome results, what the mind does in the unenlightened state is it blames other people for the things that you're experiencing, rather than realizing that what you're experiencing is based on the decisions that you're you're making. So what the Buddha is talking about when he describes awakening to enlightenment, what it means to awaken or to be awake is to have wisdom of these natural laws. Because when you live in a world that you don't understand, you will struggle and you'll have difficulties. Just like when we lacked wisdom of the natural law of gravity, we struggled and have difficulties. As a child, we fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we broke our toys, and we really struggled with this. We cried and cried and cried. We were so upset. But slowly but surely, we gained wisdom of that natural law of gravity, and now we don't believe in that natural law. We see the truth for ourselves, that it's true. And now with that wisdom, we navigate the world more peacefully, and it's easier for us to accomplish the things that we'd like to accomplish. That's why we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world, because we might say that we're fully awake to the natural law of gravity. We never believed in it. We can see the truth for ourselves that it exists. And that natural law of gravity affected us, whether we're aware of it or not. And the same thing is true about the natural law of karma. It affects us whether we're aware of it or not. And it's important not to believe in this natural law. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's not about any of that. It's not punishments and rewards. It's literally like a sequence of events. And there's certain decisions that we make that will lead to certain results that we experience. So what the Buddha is doing throughout all of his teachings is helping you to be able to see this natural law. And you shouldn't believe any of his teachings. There isn't belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing a bunch of things and hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning, growing, and developing in this life to then be able to create the ideal life for yourself now, where you can get to that peace and joy. But if you don't understand the world that you live in, you'll struggle and have difficulties. That's what the mind does in the unenlightened state. So here he's giving us this guidance on how to have sustaining, favorable relationships, because this is something that the unenlightened mind really struggles with. You probably have certain relationships that you're struggling in, maybe with your parents or your siblings or your life partner or children or things like this. People that you're the closest to, those are the people that you'll have the most challenges in those relationships, because your mind's holding on and craving, expecting and wanting those people to be a certain way. Your parents, your siblings, and other people, maybe a life partner, you're having this craving for permanence, having wants and expectations. And if they do things your way, you get happy and excited about that. But if they don't do things your way, you'll get frustrated or agitated or annoyed. But this is your own mind causing that, because your mind is putting expectations on them and wanting them to be a certain way. And the mind's ego thinks I'm right and everyone else is wrong. My way is the best way. Everybody else's way is the wrong way. And if they do it my way, that's great. That's wonderful. But if they don't do it my way, then they're doing it wrong. And that means that I'm going to now get frustrated. That's just the mind causing that itself. You need to be able to see that for yourself, that not everyone's going to do things your way. It's impossible, because you live in an impermanent world. Not everybody does things exactly the same way. So as long as the mind craves permanence, it will go out into the world and try to convince other people to do things your way. But the problem is there's 8 billion people in the world, and you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. So what the Buddha is giving you here in this particular discourse is 4 things that are going to help you to be able to have favorable and sustaining relationships. And if you practice these 4 things, this will help you in your relationships. You would need more than just this in order to have successful relationships, but these are 4 qualities that you need to practice. There's another teaching called the Eightfold Path, which is the core central teaching. You would need to learn that inside and out, backwards and forwards, to be able to help you. But then as you've learned that and you've grown and developed with the Eightfold Path, the main teaching of the Buddha, this is a second teaching that he's helping you to now be able to see how to make sure that you develop favorable relationships, because it's fun to be in relationships where there isn't any bitterness and hostility and harshness, and you don't have broken relationship after broken relationship after broken relationship. But if you're having those kinds of situations, you can see that there are certain struggles that you're having due to the decisions that you're making. There are certain decisions that you're making that's leading to your own bitterness and harshness and hostility in your own broken relationships. But if you keep blaming other people for what you're experiencing, you never actually fix it. So this is the Buddha helping you to be able to see, here's the way to make wise decisions around relationships. That he talks about giving endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality. What giving is generosity. That's why this is in this particular book, because this book is all about generosity. Generosity is giving and sharing with the people around you. You'll find if you do that, that is going to help you to have favorable relationships. Whereas if you're selfish and you're hoarding things and you're not willing to share with other people, it's going to strain your relationships. So the Buddha teaches you to give and share with the people around you. Maybe you share food, or you share clothing, or you share your house. Maybe people come over and sleep sometimes. Or maybe when you go out to eat, maybe you buy your friends lunch or something like this. Of course, you need to do this from the middle way, because if you are overextending yourself, giving your time, effort, energy, and resources extensively, you wouldn't have the things that you need in order to sustain your life. But if you were all the way on the other side where you were never sharing, the mind's going to be quite selfish. So everything the Buddha taught is about coming to the middle and practicing what's called discernment, which is wise decision making. So when you practice generosity with the people around you, this is going to help you to build favorable relationships. So the Buddha teaches you to practice that in all your relationships. Then he talks about endearing speech here. In the Eightfold Path, that core central teaching that the Buddha has, he gives you the guidance on how to speak in ways that is wise. He explains 4 things. He says that it's unwise to lie, to have gossip or slander, to have harsh speech, or something called frivolous speech, where you're just yada, 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 talking all the time without any kind of point or any kind of purpose, not being clear and concise in the way that you speak. So if you're lying, if you're having gossip or slander, if you're having harsh speech, like your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, or you have frivolous speech where you're just talking without any kind of real clarity or conciseness or purpose, it's not going to produce wholesome results in your day-to-day life. So the first thing you would like to do is clean that up in terms of your speech and all your relationships. Because if you lie, your friends and family are going to find out about those lies, and they're going to consider you to be unreliable and that you're not trustworthy. And now this is going to strain your relationships. If you're gossiping and slandering, meaning you're damaging other people's reputation, this is not going to help you to develop favorable relationships. Or if you're harsh, having harsh speech, which is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, you're going to need to pay attention to that as you speak. Because if you're speaking harshly in your relationships, it's not going to help you to build favorable, long-lasting, and sustaining relationships. And if you have frivolous speech, where you just have idle chatter or unpurposeful, unbeneficial speech, people are just going to tune you out. They're not going to be interested in listening to what it is that you have to say. So this is like the first level of speech that the Buddha teaches you to be able to have as part of the Eightfold Path. But then he goes deeper into a teaching called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Here he teaches you to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. Speaking at the proper time is making sure you're not interrupting people, because if you're interrupting people, you have a certain craving. You're really longing, yearning, you want to jump in there and talk. You can't wait your turn. You're not patient because your mind's chasing. It's wanting to jump in there and talk. Or if you're speaking with anger and hatred in your mind, if you have frustration and agitation in your mind, that's not the proper time to talk. Or if the other person is angry or frustrated or agitated, it's not the proper time to talk, because you can't get anything into their mind to be able to help the situation. So oftentimes when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind isn't patient enough to just step aside, calm your mind down, wait several minutes, hours, or days before it's time for you to actually talk. That would be the proper time. Because if you talk when your mind's angry, that anger is just going to come out and it's going to damage your relationships. So remember, the teachings of the Buddha aren't based in belief. As I'm teaching you here today, you can independently verify what I'm sharing with you is true, because you can look in your life and you can see where these things have occurred. And you don't have to feel bad. You don't have to feel guilty or shameful about this. This is just what the mind does in the unenlightened state, is it lacks wisdom, and it will speak at the improper time. It will have anger and frustration, and you will speak through that, and then it's going to damage your relationships. So what the Buddha is teaching you is the wisdom of how to interact in the world in a way that's going to produce wholesome karma or wholesome results for you. So speaking at the proper time is really important, that you're not interrupting people, that your mind is calm and peaceful, it's not angry or frustrated. And then the other person, same thing, that their mind isn't angry or frustrated. And then making sure that you're not lying. We've already talked about that. We've already talked about speaking gently, which is you pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. We talked about speaking beneficially, which is like clarity and conciseness and purposefulness behind your speech. And then you'd like to wrap all of this in a mind of loving kindness. The opposite of that would be inner hate. So you would like to wrap all of your speech in this mind of loving kindness, where you have this genuine interest in seeing others be well, right? So these are called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech: that you speak at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And now you can have this endearing speech in your relationships, where now this is going to produce more and more favorable relationships for you. But of course, you're not going to be able to just go out there and snap your fingers and instantly start practicing this. That's why the Buddha teaches you things like meditation and other training, to be able to prepare your mind to be able to go out there and implement the things that I'm sharing right now. Because you might listen to me intellectually and you're like, yeah, it would be nice if I wasn't so bitter and harsh and hostile in those relationships. So it's one thing to understand that intellectually, but it's a whole other thing to go out into the world and actually do it. So that's where the Buddha gives you the tools and techniques of how to train your mind so that you can actually do it. So part of the learning and growing on this path is, yes, understanding it intellectually, but then implementing the tools and techniques to practice and train your mind and uproot the causes and conditions that are producing the harsh speech. There's certain pollutions in your mind that are producing that harsh speech, but you can train your mind away from that, and that's becoming that better and better human being. Then there's beneficent conduct. This is the moral conduct around your bodily actions, for example, and the way you interact with people. There's certain things you can do to harm others through your bodily actions. This natural law of karma brings your attention to the understanding that anytime you cause harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha teaches you not to cause harm through your speech, your actions, and your livelihood, the way you sustain your life, the way you have a certain occupation or job. If you're causing harm through your speech, your actions, or your livelihood to other living beings, this harm is just going to come back to you. And again, when that's occurring, the unenlightened mind with its lack of wisdom will tend to blame other people rather than to see that it's your own decisions that are leading to this harm. So beneficent conduct is described in the Eightfold Path as well, in terms of purifying your conduct so you're not causing harm to others. But you need to be able to understand what that is, cultivate the wisdom of that, and then implement the tools and the techniques to be able to train your mind to be able to do that. Then lastly, the Buddha talks about equality, that it's important that when you're in relationships that you see everybody is equal. Oftentimes what the mind does in the unenlightened state with its ego is it'll think I'm above people and it'll look down on somebody. Or you might put yourself below somebody and you might look up to someone with such awe and admiration that you're shaken up. This is coming from our animal existences. That's why I'm teaching tomorrow this evolution of animal to human, because the mind in the animal world, animals need a pecking order. They need to know who's above them and who's below them, because you can't survive as an animal without that. You know, we're a herd of elephants. We needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because the female matriarch of our herd, she's showing us where the food is, where the watering holes are, where the migration paths are. If we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, we'd just be a roaming elephant out in the jungle, not knowing how to survive. So we need this strong pecking order in the animal world. But in the human world, we don't need that. What the mind does, though, in the human world, because the evolution of our consciousness in the unenlightened human mind functions very much like an animal, is that the mind will have this pecking order, that it'll see people as being above you or below you. And now when you're in a relationship and you're doing that, you're going to be talking down to people who you see below you, and you're going to be talking up to people who you think's above you. And now your mind can't be calm and steady and stable, making wise decisions. And when you're talking down to people, they're just going to push you aside. They're not going to be interested in being around you, right? And if you're talking up to people and you're all shaken up, people are going to think you lack confidence, and they might try to walk over you, right? So this equality is so important in relationships. You know, sometimes people think that the Buddha taught, this is not true, but sometimes people think that the Buddha must have taught that women are below men because he taught 2,500 years ago, and he must have degraded women or minorities or some other group of people. This isn't true. You can see it right here in the words of the Buddha, that the Buddha taught to have equality in relationships. He taught husbands to respect wives. He taught wives to respect husbands. He taught parents to respect their children, and he taught children to respect their parents too. You see that in this discourse as well, right? So the Buddha is teaching everyone to treat everybody equally. If you put yourself above or below people, you're not going to be able to have a favorable relationship. So the Buddha never taught that anybody was below you. So he's not degrading or diminishing anybody whatsoever. So today, people might think that they're above another person, but there's no pecking order in the human realm. We look at that and we're disinterested in it, because when you're around someone who talks down to you and puts themselves above you, you don't like it and you push them aside. So that's why it's unwise for you to do that to other people, because it's not going to produce this favorable relationship. So these are the 4 qualities that the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that you need in each one of your relationships in order to produce these sustaining, long-lasting, fulfilling, and favorable relationships. And then he gives you some guidance and some more details down here that I don't know that we necessarily need to go through this, but if you guys have questions on it, you're more than welcome to let me know what those are. Do you guys have questions on this? Remember, if you guys could use the mics here, and anybody online, you can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Anything you guys would like to ask? No questions? Okay. Let me see if we have anything here online. Okay, I don't see any questions here. So let's see what the next one is. By the way, what you guys have here in these books, volumes 2 through 13, is you have the original words of the Buddha, which will help you to be able to see what did he teach, and also help you see what he didn't teach too, because there's a lot of people out there that have misunderstandings about the teachings of the Buddha and what he actually taught. So here you can see what he taught and what he didn't teach. Then you've got this reference here that this takes you back to the original Pali Canon, so you can see where this came from, because there's things that the Buddha is typically talking about before this or after this, and you can see what did he actually taught, and you can gain confidence that this is actually coming from the Pali Canon. Then you've got words from me that are helping you to be able to understand how to integrate this into your day-to-day life, where I explain the teachings and kind of really help you to more fully understand them. So here you can see I'm talking about generosity, endearing speech, talking about beneficent conduct and equality, and I'm going into detail about what these things are and how to implement it in your day-to-day life. So you have that available to you in each of these discourses. So this is chapter 12 in volume 13. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? This one's also about a half a page. Boulder? Okay.
Three things prescribed by the wise. Monks, there are these 3 things prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. What 3? 1, giving is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. 2, the going forth is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. 3, attending upon one's mother and father is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. These 3 things are prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. Wholesome people prescribe giving, harmlessness, mental discipline, and mental restraint, service to one's mother and father, and to the peaceful practitioners of the spiritual life. These are the deeds of the good, which the wise person should pursue. The noble one, possessed of vision, goes to a heavenly world.
Okay, thank you, Boulder. So here again, the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this cause and effect. That's what all of his teachings are coming back to in one way or another. This first one we already talked about, generosity and why that's important. It's training your mind to let go, eliminating selfishness, because an enlightened being isn't going to be selfish. They're going to be willing to give and share with the people around them. And this is training your mind to let go, not holding on to things, craving permanence. And then he says, the going forth is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by the wholesome people. What he means by the going forth is this is becoming ordained, right? During the lifetime of the Buddha, a lot of times the people who were getting to enlightenment were becoming ordained. That household life, living in the household and practicing these teachings was very challenging for people because they didn't have the time to learn and grow and develop on the path. Because, for example, just to get water in our house, this took a long time, right? If we had lived in a house with 3, 4, 5, 6 different people, then at least 2 or 3 times a week, we had to carry these buckets over to the well. We had to fill up the buckets, bring them back to our house, dump them, go back to the well, fill them up, bring them back. This was a lot of work going back and forth to be able to just get water in our house. It could take you a half a day, 2 or 3 times a week just to get water in your house. Nowadays, we just walk over, we turn a spigot, and boom, we got water, right? To get food, it was very challenging 2,500 years ago. You had to get the seeds, you had to plant them in the ground, you had to grow the plants, you had to nurture the plants, you had to harvest the plants, you had to bring it in, you had to chop it up, you had to prepare it, you had to cook it. I mean, it was a lot of work just to get food. Even to get clothing, it was very challenging. These had to be made by hand. People needed to make these clothes. So in the household life, there were so many different tasks that were needed to be done in order to just sustain your life. Where today we've systematized a lot of this stuff. It's really easy. If we'd like to get this article of clothing, boom, we just go to the store and we got it. If we'd like to get food, boom, we just go to a restaurant and we got it. We'd like to get water, turn the spigot, boom, we've got it. In fact, we have so much time in the household life nowadays that people tend to fill it up with unbeneficial things. Right? You might be searching social media for 3 hours, 4 hours a day, or looking at YouTube videos for endless hour after hour after hour. You can shrink some of that stuff down, and it'll actually give you a lot more time to do things like reading and studying the teachings that are going to train your mind and help you get to this enlightened mental state. You'll be able to do things like meditate and train your mind that way. So the going forth prescribed by the wise is that going into homelessness, going into a life of being ordained, living at a temple. That's what the Buddha was talking about. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, that's essentially how people were getting to enlightenment. There were household practitioners that were getting to enlightenment, but it just wasn't as common because household practitioners were so busy just trying to sustain their life. Where today, we might actually say it's actually easier to get to enlightenment as a household practitioner than it even was during the lifetime of the Buddha, because we have a lot more time available to us to do things like come here and listen to the teachings and learn and grow and develop on the path. So then the third one here is attending upon one's mother and father is prescribed by the wise. The Buddha talks about our parents almost in a way that is like we should have this debt of gratitude to our parents. And the reason why is because getting into a human life is the very best thing that could ever happen for you. Now, I'm sure that you don't agree with everything your parents did. You might actually have a turbulent relationship with your parents. This is common for people to experience. You're not ever going to get to a point where you agree with everything that anybody has ever done in their life, because you have your way of doing things and other people have their way of doing things. That's impermanence. That's the nature of the world. That's the truth about the world, that everybody does things in a different way. But if you have expectations that your parents should do things a certain way, when they don't meet your expectations, you'll be angry and frustrated. And you might even blame them for being the ones who are causing that anger and frustration. But they're not the ones who are causing that anger and frustration. Surely they could be doing things that are unwise, but that's not what's causing your anger and frustration. Getting into this human life is the very best thing that could ever happen for you, because now you can actually train your mind to be able to get to this enlightened mental state, where in other existences, like an animal, for example, they don't have the capability to fully cultivate their mind and train their mind to be able to get to enlightenment. An animal is going to ultimately need to get into a human existence in order to be able to train their mind to get to enlightenment. So while we disagree with certain things that our parents did, nonetheless, they did give us life. They did help us to sustain our life. They gave us food, clothing, shelter, medical care, maybe even some education to be able to get to the point where now we're adults and we can actually choose for ourselves the things that we would like to do in the world, that we can sustain our own life, right? So there's this debt of gratitude that we can have for our parents, where we can just have gratitude that they actually did whatever they needed to do to get us to this point where now we're self-sustainable. So you're never going to agree with 100% of what your parents do in life, but you can at least have gratitude for the fact that you got this life and that you're at this point now where you're an adult and you can do things on your own. And now you can just look back and be thankful for the things that they did in order to get you to where you are today. And surely they didn't meet all your expectations, but your expectations is the problem, right? That as long as you have certain expectations, your parents will never meet those. And even if they meet those expectations, you'll be happy for a period of time, but then your expectations will change. Right? This is what people do to you too. Your parents might have certain expectations for you, and you've been working really hard to try to meet those expectations, and you always fall short of their expectations. And then they're angry and they're frustrated, and maybe even they're bitter and harsh and hostile. But even if you meet their expectations, they're only going to be happy for a little bit, and then their expectations are going to change. Right? You're just going to be chasing that for the rest of your life. So you need to let that go. Realize that you are your own being. You don't have to meet your parents' expectations. That's not the goal of your life, is to meet your parents' expectations. Your parents are living their life. They get to make their own decisions. And once they start putting expectations on you and trying to control you, that's their cravings, desires, attachments. But if you're doing the same thing back to them, it's the same thing. You're putting expectations back on them and wanting them to be a certain way. You need to get free of that, where you see that that's actually what's causing the complications in your mind and in your day-to-day relationships. So the Buddha teaches here to attend to one's mother and father, meaning that you check in on them from time to time, essentially, making sure that they have the things that they need, because this is the Dhamma, that they took care of you as a child to get you to this point where you are now. And then it would be wise for us to make sure that we check in on our parents from time to time to be sure that they have the things that they need in order to sustain their life. Now that we're older and we can do things for ourselves, we can essentially help to repay that debt of gratitude by making sure our parents have the things that they need. And this would be us taking care of our parents. So these are the things that the Buddha is describing here as being wholesome. That wholesome persons prescribe giving, harmlessness, right? Because as long as you're causing harm, harm is going to come back to you. Mental discipline, which is being able to control the mind. In mental restraint. Let's be able to restrain your mind, because the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't know how to restrain itself. You'll chase and chase and chase and chase and chase. The mind will think, I know what I need to be happy. More money. That's what'll do everything. That'll fix everything. Let me get more money. Or let me get a better house or a better car. That'll fix everything. Let me get one of those. Or I know what it is. Let me go to Thailand. That'll fix everything. Let me go visit Thailand. Now everything will be wonderful if I go to Thailand. Yeah, but that's just temporary, right? You need to be able to build a life for yourself where you're always enjoying everything about your life. But you're not going to be able to do that without the wisdom of how to train your mind to be able to accomplish that. So this mental restraint is being able to observe that your mind is longing, yearning, and chasing after things, and then restrain it and pull it back. And if you're able to do that, eventually you'll get to the point where your mind doesn't chase after things. That you know that, yeah, I need money, and let me make sure I have enough money, but I'm not going to chase it and base my feelings on it. But I'm also not going to be over here where I'm just dull and lethargic and lazy and never attend to the things that I need to do. Remember, everything the Buddha taught is about this middle way and making wise decisions to gradually pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest. So you're going to need money in your life, but it's when you chase it and you base your feelings on it, that's where you're going to end up experiencing the frustration and sadness. But also, if you're all the way on this other side where you didn't attend to acquiring the things that you need, you're going to be frustrated, agitated there too. It's not money that's going to lead to your happiness, because when your bank account balance is here, you'll be happy. But when it goes here, you'll be sad and frustrated. And your bank account's going to do that all throughout your life. This is the impermanent nature of your bank account, that your bank account's going to be going up and down throughout your life. But if you only can be happy when your bank account balance is here, then that means when it goes here, you'll be sad or frustrated. When the only thing that's happened is change. That's all that's happened is change. But the mind craves permanence. So you need to be able to observe when your mind's longing, yearning, and chasing after things, and then be able to restrain it and pull it back. That's what the Buddha is saying here, is that the wholesome people prescribe mental restraint because they understand that in order to get to peacefulness and joy, you're going to need to restrain your mind. If you keep chasing after things, you'll never get to peace and joy because it's not the external things in the world that are going to lead to your happiness and your peacefulness. You're going to need a certain amount of those in order to sustain your life, but it's when you base your feelings on them that you're causing your difficulties and the mind is going to be sabotaged, unable to be able to experience peace and joy. So here the Buddha is talking about this peacefulness for practitioners in the spiritual life in service to one's parents. So this is helping you to be able to see the cause and effect of how to live this wholesome life and be able to get to the point more and more where the mind is actually enlightened. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter? Anything you would like to ask? You have a question, Joycelyn? Yeah?
What is the meaning down at the bottom? The noble one possessed of vision goes to a heavenly world.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I meant to describe that. So all the teachings of the Buddha are about getting to the peace and joy in this life. That's what enlightenment is, right? Getting to enlightenment in this life where you've trained your mind, you're experiencing the peace, the calm, serenity, contentedness with joy, the focus, concentration, clarity, the deep memory. All your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming and at ease. You're not even in a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment. It's physically impossible for you to experience a bad mood. So that's what he's guiding you to be able to accomplish. And as you're training your mind to get to that point, you'll be able to see that that's actually what it's doing because you can see more and more peacefulness coming into the mind. But if for any reason you fall short of enlightenment, meaning that you haven't quite purified your mind fully, if you die, whatever is going on in terms of the status of your mind and the status of these pollutions, that's what's going to determine what you experience in your next life. Where is your next rebirth going to be? The Buddha teaches these 5 realms. He teaches hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, which is ghosts. Then there's the human realm and the heavenly realm. And all these beings are in the same time and space as us. And this can all be independently verified as part of one's path to enlightenment. So if you're making your way to enlightenment and you get to enlightenment in this life, wonderful. You're not going to be reborn anywhere in the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha describes that very clearly. But he doesn't describe what's next after enlightenment. He doesn't talk about some wonderful place that you're going to go after enlightenment or anything like that. He just focuses on getting to a good, wholesome, peaceful life now in this life. But if you're making your way to enlightenment and you've been purifying your mind and you fall short of enlightenment, there's the potential of being reborn into the heavenly world. That's not the goal of the path to enlightenment. In the heavenly realm, being in the heavenly realm is not a permanent existence. Just like everything around you is impermanent, and you can verify the world is impermanent, the heavenly realm is impermanent too. Oftentimes people are taught that it's a permanent existence, but you can see the world around you is constantly changing. It is impermanent. And you can see that there's no way that this heavenly realm is actually permanent because everything around you is constantly changing. So while the Buddha is guiding you to enlightenment, and that's the ultimate goal, if you fall short for any reason, there's the potential of being reborn in this heavenly world. But the heavenly world, you still are in the cycle of rebirth. You haven't escaped. You haven't done what it is you need to do. And those beings in the heavenly realm are oftentimes complacent because they're experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings. And while they have the ability to get to enlightenment, they oftentimes don't apply the effort and energy to get to enlightenment, because they're only experiencing pleasant feelings. They don't experience painful feelings and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So in the human realm, there's kind of built-in motivation for you to be able to get to enlightenment, because you don't like those painful feelings, the anger and sadness and guilt and shame and fear, or the neither painful nor pleasant feelings like discomfort and shyness and things like that. So the beings in the heavenly realm, while they have the ability to get to enlightenment, they oftentimes don't, and they're reborn into other realms. So it's not an ideal existence, but it is a possibility. If you've been training your mind to get to enlightenment and you fall short, you have less pollution in your mind. So therefore, there's the potential to be reborn into the heavenly world. But that's not what the Buddha's guiding you to be able to accomplish. But it's a result, and he's teaching you this cause and effect so you can see that clearly.
Well, the heavenly realm is not a permanent existence.
That's true.
It is not the end result. It is not enlightenment.
It's not enlightenment. That's correct. Those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth. It's a different realm. It's a formless realm. It's all here in the same time and space as us, but those beings still are in the cycle of rebirth, and they're going to need to get out. They can be reborn from the heavenly realm down into hell or animal realm or afflicted spirits, or even in the human realm, or back into the heavenly realm. So they're going to need to get out of the cycle of rebirth in order to experience complete peace and complete joy. Yeah, you're welcome. By the way, the Christian Bible has the same thing. That's what Christians don't understand. The Christians think that heaven is permanent, but it says right in the Bible that it's not. Right? Because what they say is that there was this angel Lucifer, right, that was in heaven, and it was trying to take over heaven and have more power than God, and then Lucifer was put into hell. That's what Christians say, right? So they can see right there, heaven's not permanent, because if heaven was permanent, that being wouldn't have been kicked out to hell, right? But that's a whole separate topic, right? It has nothing to do with the teachings of the Buddha. But I know you come from a Christian background, so that's why I share that with you, that even though people talk about heaven as being permanent, you can see right in the Bible that it's actually not, based on what's being described. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions you guys would like to ask? You have a question, Boulder? Yeah.
A little bit on the tending to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And family, you know. One thing I learned a new word last year, nepotism. I think I was reading something, the small book from Dalai Lama or something. I know we're not studying Tibetan Buddhism, but it was interesting to me that, you know, many of the things that ordained monks let go of also are all these attachment to people, and they don't listen to music and all these things because they get in the way of developing and learning. And I've seen it so much in my culture when I go home. People work, and are very generous to the people closest to them only. And there's a certain liberation being away from all that. In my case, definitely over attachment. So, a question here. It can be the distraction of a family. It's something that's very real to me. So I guess in this, being generous, especially to your parents specifically, did the Buddha talk about other family, you know, one's children, one's siblings and closest relatives? Or is there mention of just exactly sort of separating from that in order to continue on the path and be generous with everyone and everything without any discrimination?
You don't need to eliminate your relationships in order to be able to get to enlightenment. The ordained practitioners, they leave from their family in order to live this life in the temple. And now through stepping away from those relationships, they can eliminate what's going on in their mind, which is a craving for permanence. It kind of puts them in an environment where the mind's more capable of being able to do that. But you don't have to leave from your relationships in order to be able to eliminate your attachments in the relationships. You can have a relationship and just not be attached. What attachment is the mind's longing, yearning, and craving for this other being to be a certain way, and craving for this being to be permanent. And you can train your mind to not do that in your day-to-day life. So the Buddha talks about multiple relationships, your relatives, your children, your life partners, all these different relationships. But he's teaching you how to practice in such a way that there's not attachment, meaning that you're not trying to force or control this other being to be a certain way, that you can now exist in this relationship, realizing that there's impermanence, and sometimes we'll be together and sometimes we won't. And that's okay. That's normal. But once we start trying to control each other and put expectations on each other, that's your expectations. That's your attachment. That's your mind longing, yearning. And now you're going to be discontent when the person doesn't do things your way. So he's teaching you how to have respect and gratitude for all people. You know, we're talking here in these discourses about parents, but he's talking throughout his teachings about all beings, and having love and kindness and compassion for all beings. That's what you can ultimately get to, is where you have harmony in all your relationships. So that is part of it. But it's important to make sure you understand that you don't need to eliminate your relationships. The only reason why family is a distraction to you, that's what the words that you used, is because your mind has craving, desire, attachment. You want them to be a certain way. And when you're around them, or when you hear of them, or you talk to them, your mind is struggling in those situations because they're doing things opposite of what you want. But you need to be able to understand that they are their own beings. They are making their own decisions. And you need to just let go mentally, where your mind isn't craving for them to be a certain way. And now if they need help or they need assistance, you're there to help them with your loving kindness and compassion, but you're not trying to control them or force them to do things a certain way. And this is where you'll be able to get to more harmony and peace, because as long as you're putting expectations on others, you'll never have a peaceful relationship, because they'll never do things your way. And they're going to feel pressured and controlled, and they're not going to like being in that kind of relationship. Just like if someone tried to control you, you don't like it. But yet the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't see that's what you're doing to other people, right? It's like you don't like it when someone tries to control you, but yet the mind's going to try to control other people, right? And this is the dilemma that the mind has. But when you see the wisdom in this and you start practicing it, you'll be able to see you can get the harmonious relationships with your parents, your siblings, a life partner, children, and you can have a wonderful relationship with all these people. That's one of the beauties of life, is having wonderful relationships. But because the ordained practitioners leave from their families and go into this life of homelessness, sometimes people think that's what the Buddha taught for everybody, that would be how they would actually get to enlightenment. And that's not true, because if that was the case, nobody would be talking to anybody. We'd all be in isolation. Nobody would be able to interact with anybody. But that's not what he actually taught. But that's what people think, just because they see what's going on with the ordained practitioners. The lifestyle with the ordained practitioners and household practitioners is different lifestyle, but they're working towards the same thing. But you can accomplish the same thing as an ordained practitioner of getting to enlightenment. You just need to understand how to do that from the household life. And that can involve continuing to have relationships. Because even ordained practitioners, they have relationships too. It's just that they don't have as deep as relationships as living right alongside a life partner, or they're not living alongside their parents or things like that. They have relationships, and they need to learn how to navigate those, because otherwise they're going to have attachment and they're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is end class here by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop on the path. If you guys would like to learn more, there's opportunities for you guys to do that. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. we have class here where I'm going to teach chapter 20, like I was talking about, the evolution of our consciousness from animal to human. And then at 6:30 tomorrow evening, we have meditation in the main hall. So you're welcome to come to that as well, where I just basically guide people in meditation. Then I just open up to whatever questions you guys have. Next week, Monday through Friday, I'm going to be teaching a course. It's called Experiencing the Jhanas in the Four Stages of Enlightenment. This is a course that we meet from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day, Monday through Friday. And I only teach it twice a year, where some of the other courses I teach, 12, 14, 16 different times during the year. This particular course I only teach twice a year. We're going to be going in detail, helping you to understand what are the jhanas and what are the four stages of enlightenment. This is basically how the mind's going to progress through to enlightenment itself. So if you'd like to attend that, you're more than welcome to. You can attend all of it or part of it. It's really up to you. You're welcome to come and go as you please. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to learn, grow, and develop. And if you'd like to learn more, you're welcome to get plugged in. You can even come talk to me and I'll help you get plugged into the resources that you need. Everything's available for you at no cost. So if you'd like to get rid of the anger and the sadness and frustration and the guilt and shame and fear and all these other feelings, there's help for you to be able to do that. You just need to decide that you're ready to do that and you'd like that help. And then when you reach out, I will help you. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.